Okay, so hey everyone, so today we're back with another video going over the most common mistakes that students make when answering a law problem question. So we're going to begin today by focusing on issue spotting. So we've got a few different things that we'll go through, but yeah, we'll begin with issue spotting. So obviously, this is tough. Issue spotting can be very, very difficult, even at the best of times, really. When you're looking at a law unit, a lot of the time, say across a 12-week semester, you will a lot of the time have 12 topics, even more than that. I think I've had units where like contracts, I reckon, was like 17 different topics, 18 different topics. Like that's a lot of different issues that there could potentially be. And within each topics, there's sub-issues, subtopics, and everything as well. So like there's a lot. It's very difficult, it can be very, very difficult. But the best advice, certainly, that I've got, which could help you improve most likely with it, is you take your time to read through questions. A lot of the time when you get into, you're answering a law problem question, students rush, whether it be in practice just because you want to get it done and you want to go and, watch on YouTube, watch me, no, I'm just joking. But, go out with your friends or whatever, a lot of the time students rush, and then that translates a lot into when you actually get into, say, a test or an exam or something like that. And then you don't really read through the question, number one, as thoroughly as you should, or number two, probably even don't read it through twice, like I would highly recommend. This is something I've been experimenting a lot with. So over the course of this semester 2 of this year, I've been experimenting with, hey, can I actually get away with reading a question through once before I start answering it? And I tried that a few times. And, I was trialing it and everything, and I just realized, no. At least for me, certainly, absolutely not. You just miss too many details, so many fundamental things of the case when you only read it through once. Because really, when you read through a fact scenario once, your brain's just getting used to it. You're just like, oh, okay, this is who Sally is. She's the boss of this company. This is Harry. He's an employee. You're not really looking at, say, the specific things they're doing. Harry is, money laundering, $5 million worth of cash or whatever. Until you get through that second read. On that first read, you're really just looking at some of the most basic details, like who the characters are or whatever. So it's really that second read is what you need. And that's really going to help you issue spot correctly, because you can point, point out, say, what someone did, like money laundering or whatever like that, fraud, something. And that's going to really help you. The second thing is really just thinking about things in their simplest form, realize what something is and what is not a red herring. So a red herring, if you guys don't know, it's just it's basically something that distracts you. I've got this tab open here, which probably just can explain it a bit better than me anyway. But yeah, it's something intended to distract attention from the real problem. So it's something that, say, an examiner will put in to deliberately try to get you to talk about it, instead of the actual issue at hand that's relevant. Because again, that's what's going to happen in law practice. Your examiners are trying to prepare you as best as possible for when you actually do get into, a law firm or whatever like that. I feel like universities that do get a lot of kind of shit for being they don't actually help you that much, they don't really help you for practical situations in real life. But I think in this scenario, at least, they do, they definitely help you, because issue spotting is a real part of it, it really is. And it's something that you've got to be good at if you're going to be a good lawyer at the end of the day. Being a student myself, number one, and being a teacher of law this year, I've certainly seen issue spotting is something which a lot of students struggle with. And, when you just boil things down to their kind of simplest form, like I was saying up here, and then, you realize what is a red herring, what's intended to distract you, that's going to help a lot. So, again, say if you've got Sally, being our boss, and then you've got Harry, who's an employee, and he's money laundering, he's committing some type of fraud or something. But then you got, Sally went and did something else. Sally went and ate a sandwich on Tuesday. Who cares? It's not relevant. It's a red herring. It's intended to put you off. You can read through it when you are reading through the fact pattern, but after that, just put it to the side. You're not going to need to discuss it. If we're really only looking at it at Harry's conduct, then yeah, we're not really going to look at Sally. Okay, and this is probably the biggest thing I can give you for issue spotting. And it's just that, like most things in life, at the end of the day, practice makes perfect. Pretty obvious stock standard advice, but it rings true. Attempt more and more questions. Again, after every question you do, go through the solutions. A lot of the time, your, high distinction feedback, looking at another student's answers, even if you compare your answers with your friends or something like that, you'll just realize, how they went about it, say, and you can look for nuances, things that tip them off. And you can ask your friends, say if you're talking to them, and be like, what made you think that this was the issue? What made you know this? Or when you're looking at the solutions, you can, a lot of the time it will say stuff like, based on this fact, this is what indicated that this, was the issue at hand that students should have looked at. And we'll get into an example of this later. But yeah, basically what I'm talking about there is a red flag, and you've got to realize these, the things that tip you off for what the correct issue is at hand, so you can actually analyze the correct thing in your law problem. So, example for a fiduciary duty, has someone acted with, self-interest? That's going to tip you off that we're talking about fiduciary duties, breach of fiduciary duties. Again, if we're just looking at whether someone completed their laundry correctly or something like that, then that's not going to be a breach of fiduciary duty or not. Maybe that's just whether someone's competent, to complete their own laundry. And you got to issue spot that correctly. And something that I would say, which would certainly help you a lot, and this will take up a bit of time, I reckon, maybe less than an hour probably, but yeah, say around an hour at most probably, is write out all the red flags you were studying for the subject that you're doing currently. So yeah, say you're doing corporations law, and then you can recognize all the different directors' duties that there are, like breach of, good faith, best interest, proper purpose, all that type of stuff. Write out the red flags for each of them. If someone's acting, not in the best interest of the company they're employed for, if they're using their power as a director, to make sure that a takeover bid doesn't come in so they can stay director, and a new company doesn't take over and fire all the current directors. Write out all the red flags that there are. And again, like I'm saying, if there's say 10 topics in your subject, I reckon it might take 5 minutes per topic. So maybe you're looking at say like 50 minutes, which is a bit of time. But again, obviously if you're watching this video, I know you're committed and you want to do well. So, 50 minutes is less than an hour. It's not that big a deal at the end of the day. So an example that I wanted to go through for this was, Sally and Harry. So we've got a different fact scenario here. So Sally and Harry are friends. One day they meet up for a coffee, and then afterwards they go on a walk. So on this walk, Sally makes a joke about assaulting Harry with a bat. Some friend she is, but actually, really, it was just a bit of a jibe. Harry is laughing. He knows she's only kidding. However, later that day, when they're about to leave, Sally kills Harry. So she took it a bit too far here with the joke, but, what is Sally liable for? That's what we're looking at. A lot of students in this situation, they would probably mention, something like assault, mention that she made a joke or something like that. But really, Harry knew she was joking. He's laughing. He knew she was only kidding. Clearly she was kidding. You don't need to talk about some type of assault or something like that, or some type of threatened assault, really, because it was just a joke. It was clearly just a joke. The thing that we're looking at is murder, or manslaughter, whatever it is, whether Sally had the requisite intention or not. So that's what you got to be looking at here. That's what she's actually liable for. And yeah, that's the thing that you've really got to dial in on. If you don't, then obviously you'll talk about the wrong thing, you'll issue spot incorrectly, and again, you'll just be wasting valuable time, say in a test or an exam or whatever, talking about the wrong issue, which is obviously not what you want to do, and it's going to set you behind for the rest of the exam. Okay, so now we go on to the next thing, which I've realized, which a lot of students end up kind of missing or just maybe not doing to the best of their ability, and it's analogizing the cases, especially because this is something like relatively easy to do once you kind of know how to do it, and once you kind of get your understanding down, because that's the first point I've got up here. You got to thoroughly understand all the cases for a subject. So again, say you're doing, what subject, I don't know, corporations law or something. You got to look at, all the different cases for all the different topics, all your director's duties, all the remedies that are out there for director's duties. And then you've got to look at, entering into contracts on behalf of the company, all that different type of stuff, and there's cases for every single topic. Understand them all. This will take a bit of time. This step is probably the most lengthy one of anything I'm going to mention today, because there can be a lot of cases. There can be up to probably 100 cases for a different unit for a subject in total for, like, say, corporations law, especially which to that one is case heavy. So this will take a while, but again, if you want to succeed, if you do this, if you memorize pretty much all the cases, or at least the important parts of all the cases, which for the most part is just important facts, then looking at the ratio, so the main point that was held in it, and some points of obiter that were important, that's really all you've got to know. Then you'll pretty much make it really easy once you get into an exam, or say you're looking at a law problem. Because really, like, how do your lecturers, your chief examiners for your units and everything, how do they end up making your problems? Like, how do they write them up? A lot of the time, they'll just be looking at the cases that they gave you, and they'll change a few details. So really, if you can get these cases down, you'll be able to spot, the issues really quickly. And analogizing the cases will therefore actually help with issue spotting as well, because you'll be able to spot, okay, it's like this case, so therefore, this is the issue at hand. So when we're looking at cases, like I said, so look at what your lecturers mentioned multiple times throughout the semester. So the example I've got here is ASIC v. Adler. So for me, this was actually this semester, and this was during my corporations law unit. And I remember our lecturer, it was really good, and he mentioned this case multiple times throughout the semester, probably like 5 different times throughout the semester, of like the 12 weeks and everything. And then in the exam, there was this specific question, which, and ASIC v. Adler, if you don't know, it's a case basically about, you had this guy, this director, and he breached a ton of director's duties. Like, he didn't act in good faith, he didn't act in best interest, he didn't act with a proper purpose. He was, not acting, well, he breached his fiduciary duties, and he didn't act with care, skill, or diligence. He basically breached every single one, like, not really a good thing to do at all. Anyway, and so that was the case. And we basically had this fact pattern in our exam where pretty much the exact same thing happened. And a lot of people didn't even realize it when I was talking to them afterwards, a lot of my friends and stuff, because I don't think they just really looked at the cases that much, or they didn't even read back or watch back the seminars like I did, the lectures, And so because they didn't do that, they didn't really know to analogize to this case, which actually ended up issue spotting all these directors' duties and answering the question a lot quicker and easier, which for me obviously was a benefit. And when you're analogizing the cases, you don't just stop at one case. If you've only got one relevant case, sure, stop there. But if you've got more, then analogize to them. Maybe not if they're going to make the exact same point, but although you could, because you could say like, this case also points in the same direction as this previous case that I've just mentioned. A says this thing, and then B also says the same thing. So they point, in the same direction. It strengthens the argument. But, if you can analogize to as many different cases as possible, really looking at the nuances of each one in detail, that's certainly going to help your answer, because it'll just really show, your level of knowledge that you have and your expertise, which other students don't. And then we get on to the next thing. So onus of proof. This is something that really no one really talks about too much. And it goes beyond, say, beyond reasonable doubt in criminal law, which is something really like everyone knows, even people that don't study law or anything like that. They know about like beyond reasonable doubt because, everyone just knows about it. It's just like a very common thing to hear, beyond reasonable doubt. However, onus of proof extends far, far beyond that, and it extends a lot in, say, like, civil cases, which even that's decided on, the balance of probabilities all the time. But really, with the onus of proof, you're looking at, like, who has to make that first argument, who has to actually start by providing evidence. And yeah, like in this example I was talking about with Sally and Harry, you would not start off by saying something like, Sally would argue she is not liable for murder, say, or manslaughter, because obviously she doesn't have the onus of proof. It's going to be Harry, really Harry's estate, because he's dead, who's going to have to prove, okay, Sally is beyond reasonable doubt. She committed this beyond reasonable doubt. She committed murder or manslaughter beyond reasonable doubt. So it's going to be them having to prove it, and then Sally would just be providing a counter argument. But she would not have the onus of proof. And obviously, again, like I said, that's usually quite obvious in, say, a criminal law scenario. But in civil cases, with, say, a fiduciary duty case or something like that, you just got to look at it. And sometimes there's not always a clear person who does have an onus of proof, but a lot of the time there is. And a lot of the time it is something that students do miss out on. Okay, so the last point I've got for today is not considering both perspectives. So if I just, how should I do this? Yeah, that's good, Zoom-wise. So yeah, not considering both perspectives. So really what you've got to do here is you've got to write about both sides. A lot of the time students, they just make this kind of like one-sided, very one-sided argument. And they just kind of say in favor of one party. If it's, say, asking here, what is Sally liable for? They'll just argue in favor of Harry, and they'll just be like, okay, Sally killed him, she's liable for murder, she's this, she's that, she's, everything basically. But they're not going to provide what Sally would counter argue with, which is what you have to do at the end of the day. So, after using that first person who has the burden of proof, so like we're saying here, it would be Harry in this case, in this scenario. You mentioned the counter argument that would follow, which here would be obviously Sally, who would counter and say, okay, as we can show here, Sally would show she did not have and this is something which you can do, which is pointing out how the second person could show holes in the first person's argument. So this would be Sally pointing holes in Harry's answer and Harry's submission, basically. And it would be Sally would say something like, she did not have the appropriate intention to kill Harry. And she would argue it was just by accident. So maybe she would argue it was manslaughter instead of murder. And she would disprove the argument made by Harry, therefore. So, pointing out something like the holes which someone made in their argument is something really good. And it's something which, I find that a lot of students tend not to do. Probably because, again, under the time pressure of an exam or something like that, you just don't really think of it. And what students mainly do is they kind of just stay on the surface level. They don't really dig deeper, which is, again, if you're wanting to get higher and higher marks, the deeper you go, obviously, the better usually that it's going to be. So that was pretty much all I wanted to do for this video. I had a spot on my face which was just bleeding before, but I cleared it off if you guys saw that early in the video. And also I just wanted to say, so this was the video on the mistakes that I commonly see students make on law problem questions. But if you want to see how to answer a law problem question correctly, you can click on this video right here, right now, pretty much. And hope you guys enjoy that. Let me know how it is, and I'll see you in the next one.